One of the most common questions that people ask about immigration is pretty straightforward and simple. If the problems are just so obvious, why don't we fix them? And at first, that sounds like a reasonable question. If there's a backlog, reduce the backlog. If the judges aren't enough, hire more judges. If there's a problem at the border, improve border security. It sounds simple, right? But in a system this old, simple is usually a trap. Because once a system has been built layer by layer over decades, changing it becomes a lot harder than identifying what's wrong with it. And that's especially true when it comes to immigration. In the first video, we talked about how immigration isn't really just one system. It's several systems operating at the same time. And in the second video, we looked at how those systems were built in layers over generations. Those two facts are more important than they might seem. Because when you combine the interconnected system with decades of accumulated layers of policy, you get something that's very difficult to change without affecting something else. And this is where our story is going to start today. Finding the problem is usually very easy. Fixing it is where things get complicated. Most of us naturally look at a problem and focus on the part that's directly in front of us. If a line's too long, we add capacity. If a department is overloaded, give it more resources. But immigration doesn't operate as a single department. It operates as a network. And networks have a habit of passing pressure from one place to another. That's why solving one problem doesn't always reduce the pressure. Sometimes it simply moves it somewhere else. By the end of this, you'll see why the solution can look perfect on paper and still run into problems the moment it meets the real world. And let's go back to what we talked about in the first video. The immigration is made up of multiple parts: border enforcement, processing, courts, work authorizations, removal processes, and several others. Many people see these as separate functions, but they're all interconnected. A decision made by one area often creates consequences somewhere else. For example, increasing enforcement may result in more people entering the legal process. More people entering the legal processes means more cases. More cases means more pressure on the courts. More pressure on the courts means longer wait times. The original idea may have achieved its goal, but it also created new demands somewhere else. Now, that's not necessarily failure. It's simply how an interconnected systems behave. But even if we could fix every one of those connections tomorrow, we still have another problem. Because the immigration system isn't carrying just today's challenges. It's carrying the decisions and priorities and compromises of generations that came before. And that's where the layers come in. In the last video, we talked about how each generation added new layers to the system. The people making those decisions weren't trying to create some complex system. No, they were trying to solve the problems that they faced at that time. But those layers didn't disappear when the next generation arrived. They stayed. And new layers were built on top of them. Which means that today's system isn't responding to one set of priorities. It's responding to many different priorities that were created at different points in time over decades. Some of those priorities complement each other, some compete with each other, and some were never designed to operate together in the first place. That's one reason that major reform on immigration becomes so difficult. You're not changing just one thing. You're interacting with decisions made across multiple eras by multiple policymakers. And in many ways, that leaves our policymakers not just trying to deal with the day's problems. Sometimes it can still feel like that they're dealing with decisions that were made decades ago. Hey, but before we go any further, let me take a moment to say welcome. Pull up a seat at the coffee table, grab a cup of coffee, and let's talk. If you like good conversation or you just like what I do, please like the video, share the video, subscribe, and leave a comment. It's one of the last free things we have left, and it really does help my channel grow. And as always, I have included a full PDF of the policy in the description below. Because the challenge just isn't understanding the system. It's understanding what happens when we try to change it. That's where many reform efforts run into reality. The proposed solution might genuinely address a real-world problem. But the solutions comes with trade-offs and consequences. Not because the idea was bad, but because that's how systems react. Adding judges may reduce the court backlog, but those judges still need staffs, facility, funding, and administrative support. Think of it this way. It's like trying to speed up a restaurant by hiring 10 more chefs, only to realize that there's only one stove still in the kitchen. The bottleneck didn't disappear. It just moved. So expanding legal pathways may help reduce pressure somewhere, but the processing system still has to be capable of handling the additional volume. Every solution creates new requirements, and those requirements often create new challenges that no one thought of when writing the current policies. And the question stops being, will this solve this problem? And becomes, what else changes if we fix this? And this helps explain something that frustrates a lot of people, myself included. Why does change seem to happen so slowly? Part of the answer is that policymakers aren't dealing with single problems. Again, they're dealing with an interconnected web of multiple policies and problems from decades ago. And if you pull just one thread, several others move. Solve one bottleneck, and another one just appears. Address one concern, and that creates another one. The larger a system becomes, the more careful changes have to be. Not because nobody wants solutions, but because all the solutions have some sort of consequence. So when people look at immigration and ask why it's so difficult to reform, the answer isn't necessarily that nobody understands the problems. We most certainly do. We can look at the system and see them. Many of the problems are well known. The challenge is that immigration isn't a single machine with a single broken part. It's a collection of interconnected systems that have been built over generations, and changing one piece often means several others need to be changed at the same time. Understanding that doesn't tell us what policy to choose, But it does help explain why change is rarely as simple as it first appears. And it also explains something else. Because the systems don't just exist on paper. They exist through the people who work inside them, depend on them, and live inside them every day. And that's where we're going to go next. This is not in Kansas anymore, and I look forward to seeing you guys in 1 week for the next video. Goodbye for now.